They all described the same sensation first, a strange tingling that started at the base of their skull and spread downward, like electricity running through water. Then came the awareness. Something was watching them from just beyond their peripheral vision. The witnesses spanned continents and generations. A farmer in Nebraska, 1967, a college student in Wales, 1994, a night shift nurse in Tokyo, 2003. They never met, never spoke, yet their descriptions are eerily parallel. Tonight, I'm sharing 13 encounters that have remained buried in private files and forgotten archives, testimonies so unsettling that even veteran researchers hesitate to discuss them openly. Welcome to Arcade Recaps. I'm your host, and these are the whispered accounts that slip through the cracks of official documentation. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and if any of these details feel uncomfortably familiar, you're not alone. Now find somewhere comfortable, let the darkness settle around you, and prepare for accounts that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the nature of contact itself. These are the hidden encounters that prove the extraordinary walks among the ordinary, and that some meetings change everything forever. The first account comes from Martha Henley, a registered nurse from rural Montana. It was October 15th, 1987, and Martha was driving home from her late shift at Mercy General Hospital. The highway stretched endlessly before her headlights, cutting through the vast emptiness of the Montana plains. She had driven this route countless times over her 12-year career, but this night would be different. Martha noticed the unusual brightness in her rearview mirror around 11:23. At first, she assumed it was another vehicle approaching from behind, perhaps a truck with high-beam headlights. But the light grew larger and more intense, casting strange shadows inside her sedan that seemed to move independently of her car's motion. When she glanced up at her rearview mirror again, the light had positioned itself directly above her vehicle. It paced her perfectly, matching her speed with mechanical precision. Martha slowed down. The light slowed down. She accelerated. The light accelerated. The synchronization was too perfect to be coincidence. Panic began to creep into her chest as she realized this wasn't any conventional aircraft. The light emitted no sound, produced no wind disturbance, and maintained its position with an stability that defied the laws of physics she understood. Martha pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing her aging Honda to its limits. But the light remained fixed above her like a celestial shadow. Then everything changed. The light expanded suddenly, enveloping her entire vehicle in a brilliant white radiance that seemed to penetrate through the metal roof and windows. Martha's last clear memory was the sensation of her hands lifting involuntarily from the steering wheel, as if some invisible force was gently prying her fingers away from control. The next thing Martha remembered was sitting in her car on the shoulder of the highway, engine running, headlights illuminating the empty road ahead. Her digital clock read 2:47 in the morning. 3 hours and 24 minutes had vanished from her life without explanation. Her fuel gauge showed she had used almost a full tank of gas, yet she couldn't recall driving anywhere except the straight stretch of highway where she now found herself. But the missing time wasn't the most disturbing aspect of Martha's experience. When she arrived home and looked in her bathroom mirror, she discovered 3 small puncture marks arranged in a perfect triangle on her left shoulder blade. The wounds were precise, clean, and showed no signs of bleeding or infection. They appeared to have been made with surgical instruments, yet Martha had no memory of any medical procedure. Over the following weeks, Martha began experiencing vivid dreams that felt more like suppressed memories fighting to surface. In these dreams, she found herself lying on a smooth metallic table in a room filled with soft, diffused light. Tall figures moved around her with fluid, purposeful motions. Their faces remained unclear, obscured by the haze that separates dreams from conscious recollection. The figures communicated without speaking, their thoughts flowing directly into her mind like warm water filling an empty vessel. They weren't malevolent, Martha recalled, but they possessed a clinical detachment that made her feel like a specimen rather than a person. They were studying her, learning from her, gathering information for purposes she couldn't comprehend. Martha never reported her experience to authorities. As a medical professional, she understood how such claims would impact her career and reputation, Instead, she documented everything in a private journal, recording each dream, each recovered memory fragment, each physical change she noticed in her body over the months that followed. The puncture marks faded within 6 weeks, but they left behind 3 small scars that remained sensitive to temperature changes. Martha discovered she could predict weather patterns with unusual accuracy simply by paying attention to the subtle sensations in those scarred areas. The marks seemed to respond to atmospheric pressure in ways that defied medical explanation. More disturbing were the changes in her perception. Martha began noticing things that others seemed unable to see, subtle movements in her peripheral vision, shadows that didn't correspond to any visible objects, and most unsettling of all, the sensation of being watched, even when she was completely alone. Her colleagues at the hospital began commenting on her enhanced diagnostic abilities. Martha found herself able to identify medical conditions and patient concerns with an intuition that went far beyond her training and experience. She could sense illness in people before symptoms manifested, predict complications hours before they occurred, and provide comfort to dying patients with a knowledge of their needs that seemed to come from an otherworldly source. The journal Martha kept grew to over 200 pages of meticulous observations and sketches. She drew diagrams of the room where she believed the encounter took place, detailed descriptions of the instruments she remembered seeing, and anatomically precise illustrations of the beings who had examined her. The consistency and detail of these drawings, created over months of recovered memories, suggested they were more than products of imagination or trauma-induced fantasy. Years passed, and Martha's experience began to fade into the background of her daily life. She continued her nursing career, eventually becoming head of the emergency department at a larger hospital in Billings. Her unusual diagnostic abilities made her legendary among her peers, though she never spoke of their true origin. But the connection established that night on the Montana highway never completely severed. Martha continued to experience moments of expanded awareness, times when her consciousness seemed to extend beyond the boundaries of her physical body. She could sense the presence of the beings who had taken her, knowing with absolute certainty that they remained aware of her existence, monitoring her progress from a distance she couldn't measure. In her final journal entry, written just months before her retirement, Martha reflected on the profound impact of her encounter. She wrote about the loneliness of carrying such knowledge in isolation, the burden of experiencing something so significant, yet being unable to share it without risking her credibility and livelihood. She also wrote about gratitude. Despite the trauma and confusion, Martha felt honored to have been chosen for reasons she might never understand. The encounter had expanded her capacity for compassion, deepened her understanding of consciousness, and connected her to a larger reality that most humans never glimpse. Martha Henley passed away peacefully in her sleep in 2019. Her nephew, clearing out her belongings, discovered the journal and initially dismissed it as the creative writing of an elderly woman with too much time on her hands. But the medical precision of her observations, the consistency of her accounts, and the prophetic accuracy of her weather predictions recorded over decades convinced him that his aunt had experienced something extraordinary. The journal now resides in the private collection of a researcher who specializes in documented encounter cases. Martha's story stands as a testament to the profound impact these experiences have on ordinary people who find themselves thrust into extraordinary circumstances beyond their control or comprehension. Her encounter reminds us that contact doesn't always follow the dramatic narratives we see in popular culture. Sometimes it's quiet, clinical, and leaves behind only fragments of memory and subtle changes that ripple through an entire lifetime. Sometimes the most profound encounters are the ones that happen in silence, witnessed only by the vast emptiness of a Montana highway and the infinite darkness of a star-filled sky. The second account emerges from the industrial heartland of Ohio, where factory worker David Kowalski experienced something that would forever alter his understanding of reality. It was March 22, 1994, and David was working the midnight shift at the Cleveland Steel Works, a massive facility that operated around the clock to meet the demands of automotive manufacturers across the Midwest. David had been employed at the plant for 8 years, specializing in quality control for steel beams used in bridge construction. His job required him to work alone in a section of the facility that most employees avoided, surrounded by the constant hum of machinery and the orange glow of furnaces that never cooled. The isolation suited David perfectly. He preferred the solitude to the chatter and politics of day-shift workers. That night began like any other. David performed his routine inspections, checking measurements and documenting structural integrity on forms that would be filed away in endless bureaucratic archives. The plant operated on a skeleton crew during overnight hours, with most workers concentrated in the main production areas, several buildings away from David's station. Around 2:15 in the morning, the machinery stopped. Not gradually, not with the typical warning sounds that preceded scheduled maintenance, but instantly, as if someone had thrown a master switch that controlled the entire facility. The sudden silence was deafening after hours of constant mechanical noise. Even the emergency lighting systems went dark, plunging David's work area into complete blackness. David reached for his flashlight, but before he could activate it, a new source of illumination appeared. A soft, blue-white light began emanating from somewhere above the factory floor, growing steadily brighter without revealing its origin. The light had an unusual quality that seemed to penetrate materials rather than simply reflecting off surfaces. David could see through solid steel beams and concrete walls as if they were made of translucent glass. As the light intensified, David became aware of movement in the spaces above him. Shapes that defied geometric description glided silently through what should have been solid ceiling and roof structures. The beings appeared to be scanning the facility, examining the machinery and materials with instruments that resembled crystalline rods, emitting focused beams of energy. David tried to move but discovered his body had become completely paralyzed. Not the heavy, drugged paralysis of anesthesia, but something more subtle and complete. His muscles simply refused to respond to his mental commands, as if the connection between his brain and nervous system had been temporarily severed. Yet his mind remained fully alert and capable of detailed observation. One of the beings descended through the ceiling material and approached David's position. As it drew closer, David could perceive its features more clearly. The entity stood approximately 7 feet tall, with proportions that suggested both human and something entirely other. Its limbs were elongated beyond normal human ratios, and its head was larger than seemed possible for its slender neck to support. But the most striking feature was the being's skin, which appeared to be composed of a material that shifted between solid and translucent states. David could occasionally glimpse internal structures that resembled circulatory or nervous systems, but configured in patterns that bore no resemblance to human anatomy. The being's eyes were large and multifaceted, like those of an insect, but they conveyed an intelligence that was unmistakably aware and purposeful. The entity approached David without making physical contact, yet David felt sensations as if invisible hands were examining his body. The examination was thorough and methodical, focusing particularly on his hands, arms, and chest. David realized the being was studying the effects of his industrial work environment on human physiology, documenting how years of exposure to steel dust, chemical vapors, and extreme temperatures had altered his cellular structure. During this examination, images began flowing directly into David's consciousness. He saw vast industrial complexes on worlds that orbited distant stars, where beings similar to his examiner oversaw manufacturing processes that created materials beyond human comprehension. These facilities operated on scales that dwarfed Earth's largest factories, producing components for structures that spanned entire solar systems. The being communicated that David's species was approaching a critical juncture in its industrial development. The methods humans use to extract and process materials were being observed and evaluated by civilizations that had faced similar challenges millennia ago. Some species had successfully transitioned to sustainable manufacturing practices that worked in harmony with their planetary ecosystems. Others had failed, consuming their world's resources until their civilizations collapsed into environmental catastrophe. David understood that his encounter was part of a larger assessment being conducted across Earth's industrial centers. The beings were gathering data about human manufacturing capabilities, environmental impact, and the potential for technological advancement that wouldn't result in planetary destruction. David's role as a quality control inspector made him an ideal subject for studying how humans monitored and maintained their industrial systems. The examination continued for what felt like hours, though David had no way to measure the passage of time while paralyzed. The being's instruments recorded detailed information about the chemical composition of David's blood, the particulate matter embedded in his lung tissue from years of industrial exposure, and the cumulative effects of electromagnetic radiation from the factory's electrical systems. But the encounter wasn't purely clinical. David sensed genuine concern from the being, a form of empathy that transcended species boundaries. The entity seemed troubled by the damage David's body had sustained from his work environment, and David received the impression that humans were viewed as a promising species that was unfortunately harming itself through ignorance rather than malice. As the examination concluded, the being transmitted a final series of images directly into David's mind. He saw possible futures for human industrial development, ranging from scenarios of environmental collapse to visions of manufacturing systems that operated in perfect balance with natural processes. The choice between these futures, the being communicated, would be made by David's generation and the one that followed. The light began to fade, and David felt sensation returning to his body in gradual waves. The being retreated upward through the ceiling, joining others of its kind who had been conducting similar examinations throughout the facility. As they departed, the normal factory lighting flickered back on, and the machinery resumed its constant mechanical rhythm as if nothing unusual had occurred. David checked his watch and discovered that 4 hours had passed since the power failure began. Yet according to the facility's automated systems, there had been no interruption in production. The machinery had continued operating normally throughout the night, maintaining perfect temperature and pressure readings that should have been impossible without human oversight. When the day shift arrived, David attempted to report the power outage, but the maintenance logs showed no record of any electrical problems. Security cameras had recorded nothing unusual, showing David performing his normal duties throughout the night without any gaps or anomalies in the footage. Even David's own inspection reports, which he distinctly remembered not completing due to the paralysis, were filled out in his handwriting with measurements and observations he couldn't recall making. The physical effects of David's encounter became apparent over the following weeks. The lung damage from years of industrial exposure began to heal at a rate that puzzled his doctors. Chest X-rays showed significant improvement in tissue clarity, and breathing tests revealed lung capacity increases that shouldn't have been possible for a man in his 40s who had worked in heavy industry for nearly a decade. More remarkably, David developed an intuitive understanding of material science that went far beyond his formal education. He began identifying structural weaknesses in steel beams before stress tests revealed them, predicting equipment failures days before they occurred, and suggesting manufacturing process improvements that increased both efficiency and worker safety. His supervisors initially viewed these abilities with suspicion, assuming David had gained access to confidential engineering reports or maintenance schedules. But when his predictions proved accurate time after time, and his suggestions resulted in measurable improvements to plant operations, he was promoted to Senior Quality Assurance Specialist and given responsibility for training other inspectors. David never spoke openly about his encounter, understanding instinctively that such revelations would end his career and subject him to ridicule or psychiatric evaluation. Instead, he channeled his expanded knowledge into improving conditions for his fellow workers, implementing safety protocols that seemed to anticipate hazards before they manifested. The being's concern for human welfare had somehow transferred to David, creating in him a deep sense of responsibility for the well-being of everyone who worked in industrial environments. He began volunteering with worker safety organizations, consulting on environmental health studies, and advocating for regulations that would protect future generations from the hazards he had experienced. Years later, as David approached retirement, he reflected on how the encounter had transformed not just his understanding of reality, but his sense of purpose within it. The beings who had examined him weren't invaders or exploiters, but concerned observers trying to help humanity navigate the dangerous transition from a primitive industrial society to something more sustainable and enlightened. David's story illustrates how contact experiences often focus on humanity's relationship with its environment and technology. The beings seem particularly interested in how human activities affect both individual health and planetary well-being, suggesting that our industrial development is being monitored by civilizations that have successfully resolved similar challenges. His encounter also demonstrates how these experiences can catalyze positive changes that extend far beyond the individual witness, creating ripple effects that improve conditions for entire communities without revealing the extraordinary source of that improvement. David Kowalski retired from Cleveland Steelworks in 2008, having overseen the implementation of safety protocols that reduced workplace injuries by 73% during his tenure. His personnel file contained commendations for innovations that saved the company millions in equipment replacement costs and insurance claims, yet David himself remained puzzled by insights that seemed to flow from a source beyond his conscious understanding. In his final weeks at the plant, David returned to the exact location where his encounter had occurred 14 years earlier. Standing among the same machinery, breathing the same metallic air, he felt a subtle presence that had never completely departed. The beings were still watching, still monitoring humanity's progress, still hoping that our species would choose wisdom over destruction in the critical decisions that lay ahead. David's medical records, obtained through a Freedom of Information request years later, documented the unprecedented reversal of industrial lung disease that his doctors had attributed to a combination of improved safety equipment and natural healing processes. No medical literature contained similar cases of such dramatic improvement in workers with comparable exposure histories, yet David's recovery was quietly celebrated as proof that the human body possessed remarkable self-repair capabilities when given proper support. The third encounter takes us to the remote wilderness of northern Alaska, where bush pilot Sarah Chen experienced contact that challenged her understanding of both aviation and consciousness itself. Sarah had been flying solo missions across the Alaskan interior for 12 years, transporting supplies to isolated communities and research stations scattered across thousands of square miles of pristine wilderness. On November 7th, 1999, Sarah was piloting her Cessna 185 from Fairbanks to a geological survey camp near the Brooks Range. The weather was clear, visibility unlimited, and her flight plan called for a routine 2-hour journey across terrain she had navigated hundreds of times before. Sarah took pride in her reputation as one of Alaska's most reliable bush pilots, known for completing missions that others considered too dangerous or challenging. Approximately 90 minutes into the flight, while cruising at 8,000 feet above a landscape of frozen tundra and jagged peaks, Sarah noticed an anomaly on her radar display. A large object was approaching from the northwest, moving at a speed that exceeded any known aircraft's capabilities. The radar signature was solid and consistent, ruling out atmospheric phenomena or equipment malfunction. Sarah attempted radio contact with Fairbanks Approach Control, but her communications equipment produced only static. Every frequency she tried yielded the same result, as if some form of interference was blocking all electronic transmissions. Her GPS system began displaying erratic readings, showing her position jumping randomly across the map despite her steady course and altitude. The object appeared visually as a metallic disc approximately 100 feet in diameter, maintaining a parallel course 50 yards off her starboard wing. Its surface was perfectly smooth, reflecting the pale Arctic sunlight with mirror-like precision. No wings, rotors, or visible propulsion systems explained how it maintained controlled flight, yet it matched her airspeed with mechanical exactness. Sarah's initial reaction was professional curiosity rather than fear. As an experienced pilot, she had encountered unusual atmospheric conditions, experimental aircraft, and optical illusions that could confuse even seasoned aviators. But this object displayed flight characteristics that violated fundamental principles of aerodynamics, maintaining perfect stability in turbulent air that was causing her own aircraft to bounce and shudder. The disc began to emit a low-frequency hum that Sarah felt more than heard, a vibration that seemed to resonate through her aircraft's aluminum structure and into her bones. Her flight instruments started displaying impossible readings. The altimeter showed her climbing and descending simultaneously. The compass spun in lazy circles, and her engine instruments indicated power fluctuations that should have resulted in immediate engine failure. Then, the disc moved closer, positioning itself directly above her aircraft. Sarah looked up through her cabin skylight and saw the object's underside, which appeared to be composed of a crystalline material that pulsed with internal light. Geometric patterns shifted across its surface like living circuitry, creating hypnotic displays of color and movement that seemed to respond to her thoughts. Sarah's consciousness began to expand beyond the confines of her cockpit. She found herself simultaneously aware of her physical body sitting in the pilot's seat and existing as a point of awareness that could observe her aircraft from outside. This dual perspective allowed her to see her Cessna from above, below, and all sides at once, creating a three-dimensional understanding of her position in space that far exceeded normal human perception. The beings operating the disc communicated with Sarah through direct mental contact, their thoughts appearing in her mind as clearly as spoken words. They identified themselves as researchers, studying the relationship between consciousness and navigation, investigating how different species develop the ability to traverse vast distances across three-dimensional space. Sarah learned that her years of bush flying had developed neural pathways that allowed her to navigate by integrating multiple sensory inputs in ways that impressed these interstellar observers. Her ability to find remote landing strips in whiteout conditions, to sense wind patterns through subtle aircraft responses, and to maintain spatial orientation in featureless terrain, demonstrated cognitive abilities that the beings considered exceptional for her species. The encounter became an exchange of knowledge that operated on levels Sarah didn't fully comprehend. Information flowed into her mind about navigation techniques used by spacefaring civilizations, methods of perceiving dimensional relationships that transcended normal three-dimensional awareness, and technologies that allowed consciousness to extend beyond physical boundaries while maintaining connection to biological forms. In return, the beings studied Sarah's navigation instincts, analyzing how human pilots developed what they called spatial intuition through experience and practice. They were particularly interested in how Sarah's brain processed multiple data streams, visual cues, instrument readings, aircraft feedback, weather patterns, and terrain features, integrating them into navigation decisions that often proved more accurate than electronic systems. The beings revealed that Earth's aviation pioneers were being monitored as part of a larger study of how species develop space travel capabilities. Human pilots, they explained, displayed navigation instincts that suggested potential for interstellar travel. Though current human technology remained primitive compared to the consciousness-based navigation systems used by advanced civilizations. Sarah experienced visions of vast space vessels, guided not by instruments or computers, but by navigators whose consciousness could perceive gravitational fields, electromagnetic currents, and dimensional relationships across galactic distances. These navigator pilots existed in states of expanded awareness that allowed them to sense the location of destination worlds as clearly as Sarah could sense the position of a familiar airstrip. The educational exchange continued for what seemed like hours, though Sarah's aircraft chronometer showed only minutes had passed since the initial contact. Time itself seemed flexible during the encounter, expanding and contracting according to the information being transmitted, rather than following linear progression. As the session concluded, the beings imparted a final gift to Sarah's consciousness. They enhanced her existing navigation abilities, fine-tuning the neural pathways that processed spatial relationships and environmental cues. Sarah felt her awareness expand to encompass a larger sphere of perception, allowing her to sense atmospheric conditions, terrain features, and navigational landmarks across much greater distances than before. The disk gradually withdrew, rising vertically until it disappeared into the pale Arctic sky. Sarah's instruments returned to normal operation, her radio communications resumed, and her GPS system displayed accurate position readings. She completed her flight to the Geological Survey Camp without incident, delivering supplies and mail to researchers who had been eagerly awaiting her arrival. But Sarah's enhanced abilities became apparent immediately. She could sense weather changes hours before they appeared on meteorological forecasts, identify safe landing areas in terrain she had never previously explored, and navigate in conditions that would challenge pilots with decades more experience. Her reputation grew among Alaska's aviation community, and she began receiving contracts for missions that other pilots considered impossible. Sarah never discussed her encounter with aviation authorities or fellow pilots, understanding that such claims would result in mandatory psychiatric evaluation and possible suspension of her commercial license. Instead, she used her enhanced abilities to improve aviation safety across Alaska, volunteering for search and rescue missions and sharing navigation techniques with younger pilots without revealing their extraordinary origin. Over the years, Sarah began to understand that her encounter was part of a broader evaluation process. The beings were assessing humanity's potential for expanding beyond Earth, studying individuals whose skills and consciousness suggested readiness for contact with galactic civilization. Pilots, with their developed spatial awareness and comfort with three-dimensional movement, represented ideal candidates for this evaluation. Sarah's story demonstrates how contact experiences often focus on human abilities that suggest potential for advancement beyond current limitations. The beings seem particularly interested in individuals who have developed exceptional skills that could translate to interstellar travel and communication with other civilizations. Her encounter also illustrates how these experiences can enhance existing human capabilities rather than replacing them with alien technology. Sarah's improved navigation abilities grew from her existing skills and knowledge, suggesting that contact experiences often serve to unlock human potential rather than imposing foreign capabilities. Years after her encounter, Sarah established a flight training school specializing in wilderness navigation and emergency procedures. Her students consistently demonstrated navigation abilities that exceeded industry standards, though Sarah attributed their success to intensive training rather than revealing the true source of her teaching methods. In her private journals, Sarah documented the ongoing effects of her encounter, noting that her enhanced perception continued to evolve over time. She developed the ability to sense the presence of other aircraft at distances far beyond radar range, to predict equipment failures before diagnostic systems detected problems, and to navigate in weather conditions that forced other pilots to ground their aircraft. Sarah Chen continued flying until her retirement in 2015, logging over 20,000 flight hours across some of the world's most challenging terrain. Her safety record was legendary among Alaska's aviation community, with 0 accidents or emergency landings, despite operating in conditions that claimed numerous other pilots over the same period. In her farewell speech to the Alaska Bush Pilots Association, Sarah spoke about the importance of developing intuitive navigation skills that went beyond reliance on technology. She encouraged younger pilots to trust their instincts, to remain open to experiences that challenged conventional understanding, and to remember that the sky held mysteries that human knowledge had barely begun to explore. Sarah's encounter reminds us that contact experiences often serve as catalysts for human development, enhancing existing abilities rather than replacing human skills with alien technology. The beings who contacted her seemed more interested in nurturing human potential than in demonstrating their technological superiority, suggesting that these encounters may be part of a gradual preparation process for eventual integration into a larger galactic community. The fourth account brings us to the quiet suburbs of Portland, Oregon, where emergency room physician Dr. Rebecca Martinez encountered something that would fundamentally alter her understanding of human consciousness and medical science. It was January 14th, 2003, and Dr. Martinez was completing her residency at Providence Medical Center, working exhausting shifts that often stretched beyond 20 hours. That particular night, Dr. Martinez was alone in the trauma bay around 3:30 in the morning when the hospital's power grid experienced what maintenance later described as a localized electromagnetic anomaly. The lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, and all electronic equipment began operating in a synchronized rhythm that had no medical explanation. Heart monitors, ventilators, and diagnostic machines pulsed in perfect unison, creating an otherworldly symphony of medical technology. Dr. Martinez initially assumed the power fluctuation was related to the severe winter storm that had been battering the Pacific Northwest for several days. But as she moved through the eerily quiet corridors to check on patients, she discovered that everyone in the hospital had fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep. Patients who had been in severe pain moments earlier now rested comfortably, their vital signs showing remarkable stability despite the cessation of their medications. In the intensive care unit, Dr. Martinez witnessed something that challenged everything she had learned in medical school. Patients with terminal illnesses were displaying cellular regeneration that defied known biological processes. Cancer markers were decreasing in real time, damaged organs were showing signs of repair, and neurological conditions were reversing at rates that seemed impossible according to conventional medical understanding. As she documented these miraculous changes, Dr. Martinez became aware of a presence in the hospital that transcended physical form. Beings of pure consciousness moved through the corridors and patient rooms, their awareness touching each person with healing intention that operated beyond the boundaries of traditional medicine. These entities worked with focused precision, addressing not just physical ailments, but the deeper spiritual and emotional wounds that often prevented complete healing. Dr. Martinez found herself able to perceive the energetic patterns that surrounded each patient, seeing their conditions as disruptions in fields of light and information, rather than simply chemical or cellular malfunctions. She watched as the conscious beings adjusted these patterns, realigning energy flows and restoring balance to systems that human medicine could barely comprehend, let alone treat effectively. One of the entities approached Dr. Martinez directly, communicating through a form of telepathic transmission that felt like warm light entering her mind. She learned that Earth's medical practitioners were being evaluated for their readiness to integrate consciousness-based healing methods with conventional treatment approaches. The beings had been observing human medical development for centuries, noting both remarkable advances and dangerous limitations in current therapeutic practices. The entity revealed that Dr. Martinez's compassionate approach to patient care had attracted their attention, her instinctive understanding that healing involved more than treating symptoms. Her ability to comfort dying patients with presence rather than just procedures, and her frustration with medicine's mechanistic limitations made her an ideal candidate for expanded knowledge. Through the mental connection, Dr. Martinez received information about healing technologies that operated by harmonizing consciousness with cellular function. She learned that many diseases originated from disruptions in the information fields that coordinated biological processes, and that these disruptions could be corrected through methods that combined focused intention with deep understanding of consciousness. Body interactions. The beings demonstrated techniques that allowed Dr. Martinez to perceive the underlying energetic causes of physical conditions. She could suddenly see how emotional trauma created specific patterns of cellular dysfunction, how environmental toxins disrupted natural healing responses, and how the patient's belief systems either supported or hindered recovery processes. But the most profound revelation concerned the role of the healer's consciousness in therapeutic outcomes. Dr. Martinez learned that her own mental and emotional state directly influenced her patient's healing responses, creating fields of coherence that could accelerate recovery or, if she was stressed and fragmented, actually impede natural healing processes. The entity guided Dr. Martinez through exercises that expanded her perceptual abilities, allowing her to sense the subtle energy signatures that preceded the manifestation of physical symptoms. She could now detect illness before conventional diagnostic methods revealed abnormalities, identify optimal treatment approaches by reading the patient's energetic responses, and facilitate healing through focused intention combined with medical intervention. As the encounter progressed, Dr. Martinez experienced a profound expansion of empathy that connected her consciousness directly with her patient's experiences. She could feel their pain, understand their fears, and perceive the deeper spiritual lessons embedded within their illnesses. This expanded awareness created a form of diagnostic ability that operated through compassionate connection rather than clinical detachment. The beings revealed that human medicine was approaching a crucial evolutionary threshold. The mechanistic model that viewed the body as a complex machine was giving way to understanding of humans as conscious beings whose thoughts, emotions, and spiritual states directly influence physical health. Medical practitioners who could bridge these approaches would become catalysts for a revolution in healing that would transform human healthcare. Dr. Martinez learned that her encounter was part of a larger preparation process involving healers, researchers, and medical professionals worldwide. The beings were providing enhanced capabilities to individuals who demonstrated readiness to integrate expanded consciousness with compassionate service, creating a network of practitioners who could introduce new paradigms without triggering institutional resistance. The educational transmission continued until dawn approached, with Dr. Martinez receiving detailed information about consciousness-based diagnostic methods, energetic healing protocols, and techniques for maintaining therapeutic coherence even in chaotic hospital environments. She understood that this knowledge came with responsibility to use it wisely, introducing new approaches gradually while respecting the limitations of current medical understanding. As the encounter concluded, the entity made subtle adjustments to Dr. Martinez's neural pathways, enhancing her intuitive abilities while ensuring the changes would integrate naturally with her existing medical knowledge. The hospital's power systems returned to normal operation, patients awakened, refreshed, and showing remarkable improvement, and the night shift proceeded as if nothing unusual had occurred. But Dr. Martinez's enhanced abilities became apparent immediately. She could diagnose conditions by simply being in a patient's presence, identify optimal treatments through intuitive knowing rather than trial and error, and provide comfort that seemed to accelerate healing beyond normal physiological parameters. Her success rate improved dramatically, earning recognition from colleagues who attributed her results to exceptional clinical skills. Dr. Martinez never revealed the true source of her abilities, understanding that such claims would destroy her medical career and credibility. Instead, she began incorporating consciousness-based approaches into her practice, teaching relaxation techniques, emphasizing the importance of emotional support, and encouraging patients to participate actively in their healing processes. Over the years, Dr. Martinez established herself as a pioneer in integrative medicine, combining conventional treatments with approaches that address the psychological and spiritual dimensions of illness. Her research papers on consciousness medicine interactions gained attention in progressive medical circles, though she always presented her insights as logical extensions of existing knowledge rather than revelations from non-human sources. The encounter had lasting effects on Dr. Martinez's personal life as well. She developed profound respect for the intelligence that coordinated biological processes, understanding that human bodies possess self-healing capabilities that far exceeded conventional medical assumptions. This perspective transformed her approach to her own health, emphasizing prevention through consciousness cultivation, rather than relying solely on external interventions. Dr. Martinez's story illustrates how contact experiences often focus on expanding human potential in areas of service and healing. The beings seem particularly interested in individuals whose work involves alleviating suffering and promoting well-being, suggesting that these encounters may be preparing humanity for advances in healthcare that integrate consciousness with technology. Her experience also demonstrates how contact can enhance existing human abilities rather than replacing them with alien knowledge. Dr. Martinez's improved diagnostic skills and therapeutic effectiveness grew from her compassionate nature and medical training, amplified by expanded awareness rather than foreign implants or technological modifications. Years after her encounter, Dr. Martinez founded a research institute dedicated to studying consciousness health relationships. Her work attracted scientists and practitioners from around the world, creating a collaborative network that advanced understanding of healing processes, operating beyond conventional medical models. Though she never publicly discussed her encounter, the Institute's research validated many of the principles she had learned during that transformative night. The fifth encounter takes us to rural Nebraska, where farmer Thomas Brennan experienced contact that revealed profound connections between consciousness, agriculture, and planetary stewardship. It was August 29th, 2007, and Thomas was conducting his nightly inspection of crops on his family's 800-acre farm near the town of Hastings. Thomas had inherited the land from his grandfather, maintaining traditional farming practices that emphasized soil health and crop rotation over maximum yield production. His approach to agriculture reflected deep respect for natural systems, viewing himself as a steward rather than an exploiter of the land that had supported his family for 3 generations. That evening, as Thomas walked through his cornfields under a canopy of stars unmarred by city lights, he noticed an unusual phosphorescence emanating from the soil beneath his feet. The glow was subtle but pervasive, creating an ethereal illumination that made the corn stalks appear to shimmer with internal light. The phenomenon seemed to pulse in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat, growing brighter and dimmer in regular cycles. As Thomas knelt to examine the glowing earth more closely, he became aware of a vast intelligence that permeated the landscape around him. This consciousness wasn't localized to any specific organism or structure, but seemed to emerge from the complex web of relationships connecting soil microorganisms, plant roots, insects, and atmospheric elements into a unified living system. The presence communicated with Thomas through sensations that bypassed language entirely, conveying information through direct experience rather than words or images. He suddenly understood the intricate chemical conversations occurring between his crops and the soil ecosystem, the way plants negotiated with beneficial bacteria for nutrients, and how the entire farm functioned as a single organism with consciousness distributed throughout its components. Thomas realized he was experiencing contact with what could only be described as the living intelligence of Earth itself, mediated through beings who served as translators between human awareness and planetary consciousness. These entities existed as bridge builders, helping individual humans recognize their participation in larger ecological relationships that sustained all life. Through this expanded awareness, Thomas perceived his farm from the perspective of the soil organisms that formed its foundation. He felt their responses to his farming practices, understanding which techniques supported their communities and which disrupted the delicate relationships that maintained soil fertility. The beings showed him how conventional agriculture damaged these relationships, creating dependencies on external inputs that weakened the land's natural resilience. But the communication went beyond agricultural techniques to address the spiritual dimensions of farming. Thomas learned that conscious participation in food production created energetic qualities in crops that nourished more than just physical bodies. Farmers who approached their work with reverence and understanding produced food that carried information patterns promoting health and vitality in those who consumed it. The beings revealed that Earth was experiencing a critical transition period where agricultural practices would determine the planet's ability to support human civilization. Industrial farming methods that treated soil as an inert medium for chemical inputs were destroying the biological systems that had maintained fertility for millions of years. Humanity faced a choice between continuing destructive practices that would lead to ecological collapse or returning to regenerative approaches that worked with natural intelligence. Thomas experienced visions of agricultural systems that operated as conscious partnerships between human farmers and the living intelligence of the land. These farms produced abundant harvests while continuously improving soil health, sequestering carbon, and supporting biodiversity. The farmers who managed these systems possessed expanded awareness that allowed them to sense the needs of their crops and respond with precision that exceeded any technological monitoring system. The encounter continued throughout the night, with Thomas receiving detailed information about regenerative farming practices that he had never studied but somehow understood completely. He learned about soil biology, plant communication networks, and ecosystem relationships with clarity that seemed to flow directly from the land itself rather than from books or agricultural extension services. As dawn approached, the beings conveyed their final message to Thomas. They were working with farmers worldwide to restore the sacred relationship between human consciousness and agricultural systems. The food crisis facing humanity wouldn't be solved through genetic modification or increased chemical inputs, but through reconnecting with the intelligence that had guided sustainable agriculture for thousands of years. Thomas felt his awareness integrate back into his individual consciousness, though the connection to the land's intelligence remained as a subtle but permanent expansion of his perceptual abilities. He could now sense the health of his soil by walking across it, identify crop needs before symptoms appeared, and time his farming activities according to natural rhythms that optimized plant growth and resilience. The changes in Thomas's farming practices were dramatic and immediate. He eliminated synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, instead working with biological systems that enhanced natural fertility and pest resistance. His yields initially decreased, causing concern among neighbors who predicted financial ruin, but within 3 years his harvests exceeded previous records while his input costs dropped significantly. More remarkably, the nutritional quality of Thomas's crops improved beyond normal parameters. Independent testing revealed mineral content, vitamin levels, and antioxidant concentrations that exceeded certified organic standards by substantial margins. His produce developed a reputation among local consumers for exceptional flavor and apparent health benefits that seemed to go beyond conventional nutrition. Thomas began sharing his methods with other farmers, though he always attributed his success to careful observation and natural farming principles, rather than revealing his extraordinary encounter. His farm became a demonstration site for regenerative agriculture, attracting researchers and practitioners from around the world who sought to understand his remarkable results. The encounter had transformed Thomas's understanding of his role as a farmer from producer of commodities to facilitator of relationship between human needs and planetary intelligence. He saw his work as sacred service that nourished both people and the land, creating cycles of abundance that could continue indefinitely if maintained with wisdom and respect. Years after his encounter, Thomas established an educational foundation that taught regenerative farming practices to beginning farmers. His methods spread throughout the region, creating a network of farms that operated as living examples of agriculture in harmony with natural systems. Though he never spoke publicly about his contact experience, the principles he taught reflected the deep ecological wisdom he had received during that transformative night. Thomas's story demonstrates how contact experiences often focus on humanity's relationship with Earth's living systems. The beings seem particularly concerned with agricultural practices that determine the planet's ability to support human civilization, suggesting that these encounters may be preparing individuals to lead transitions toward sustainable food production methods. His experience also illustrates how contact can enhance human connection to natural intelligence, rather than replacing it with technological solutions. Thomas's improved farming abilities grew from expanded awareness of existing ecological relationships, demonstrating that many solutions to global challenges may emerge from deeper communion with Earth's inherent wisdom, rather than external interventions. The sixth account emerges from the mountains of western Montana, where search and rescue coordinator Janet McKenzie encountered beings whose presence revealed humanity's potential for developing extraordinary survival capabilities. It was February 11th, 1996, and Janet was leading a rescue mission to locate 3 lost hikers who had become separated from their group during a severe blizzard in the Bitterroot Range. Janet had 22 years of experience in wilderness rescue operations, with a reputation for finding lost individuals in conditions that defeated other search teams. Her intuitive ability to predict where disoriented hikers might travel, combined with exceptional physical endurance and weather tolerance, made her the regional coordinator's first choice for high-risk rescue missions. The search had been ongoing for 18 hours when Janet's team became separated in whiteout conditions that reduced visibility to less than 10 feet. Radio communications failed due to the storm's electromagnetic interference, and GPS units provided erratic readings that made navigation impossible. Janet found herself alone in terrain that challenged even her extensive wilderness experience. As she struggled through chest-deep snow in sub-zero temperatures, Janet became aware of a presence that seemed to emanate from the storm itself. The sensation wasn't threatening, but felt like an ancient intelligence that had observed countless human struggles against the mountain's harsh conditions. This presence conveyed understanding that went beyond sympathy to encompass profound respect for human courage and determination in the face of overwhelming natural forces. Gradually, Janet realized she was no longer alone in the physical sense. Figures moved through the blizzard with impossible grace, their forms visible despite the blinding snow and darkness. These beings appeared humanoid, but possessed adaptations that allowed them to navigate extreme weather conditions with ease that defied normal physiology. The entities communicated with Janet through direct consciousness transfer, sharing information about survival techniques that went far beyond conventional wilderness training. She learned how to modify her metabolic processes, to conserve energy and generate body heat more efficiently, how to sense safe routes through treacherous terrain using subtle environmental cues, and how to maintain mental clarity and emotional stability in life-threatening situations. But the most remarkable aspect of the encounter was the being's demonstration of expanded sensory capabilities. Janet discovered she could perceive the location of the missing hikers through a form of consciousness, tracking that operated across vast distances. She could sense their emotional states, physical conditions, and exact positions, despite the storm and darkness that made visual or auditory contact impossible. The beings revealed that they were observers of human adaptation to extreme environments, studying how Earth's species developed survival capabilities under challenging conditions. They had been monitoring Janet's rescue work for years, impressed by her intuitive navigation abilities and her capacity to remain calm and effective in situations that overwhelmed most humans. Through the mental connection, Janet learned that her rescue instincts represented evolutionary potential that could be enhanced through conscious development. The beings showed her how to expand her sensory awareness to detect the subtle energy signatures that all living beings emitted, allowing her to locate lost individuals by following these energetic traces, rather than relying solely on physical evidence. The encounter became a training session in consciousness-based survival techniques that operated beyond normal human limitations. Janet experienced her awareness expanding to encompass the entire search area, perceiving the mountain environment as a living system whose patterns and flows could guide rescue operations with unprecedented precision. She learned to read weather patterns through energetic perception rather than just meteorological indicators, to identify safe travel routes by sensing the stability of snow and rock formations, and to maintain physical performance in extreme conditions by consciously directing her body's energy systems. The beings demonstrated how consciousness could extend beyond the boundaries of physical form while maintaining connection to the body, allowing rescue workers to conduct searches that covered vast areas instantaneously. This expanded awareness could locate victims, assess their conditions, and identify optimal rescue approaches without the time delays that often proved fatal in wilderness emergencies. As the training continued, Janet discovered that her enhanced abilities allowed her to provide remote assistance to the missing hikers. She could project calming influence that helped them maintain hope and make better survival decisions, guide them towards shelter through subtle environmental modifications, and sustain their physical strength through conscious energy transmission. When the encounter concluded, Janet found herself equipped with survival and rescue capabilities that exceeded anything taught in conventional training programs. She could navigate in zero visibility conditions, maintain body heat in extreme cold, and locate lost individuals through methods that appeared miraculous to outside observers. The immediate result was the successful rescue of all 3 missing hikers, whom Janet located despite conditions that had forced other search teams to abandon their efforts. Her ability to move through the blizzard and find the exact locations where the victims had taken shelter amazed her colleagues and established her reputation as the region's most effective rescue coordinator. Over the following years, Janet's success rate in wilderness rescue operations became legendary. She consistently located victims in record time, often finding individuals who had been missing for days in vast wilderness areas. Her methods appeared to combine exceptional woodcraft skills with intuitive abilities that bordered on the supernatural. Janet never revealed the true source of her enhanced capabilities, understanding that such claims would undermine her credibility within the search and rescue community. Instead, she attributed her success to careful observation, extensive experience, and natural aptitude for wilderness navigation. But the encounter had effects that extended beyond rescue operations. Janet developed profound connection to mountain ecosystems, understanding weather patterns, wildlife behavior, and geological processes with clarity that seemed to flow from direct communion with the landscape itself. She could predict avalanche conditions, locate water sources in drought conditions, and identify safe camping areas through awareness that transcended conventional environmental assessment. The beings had enhanced Janet's existing abilities rather than replacing them with alien technology, demonstrating how contact experiences often serve to unlock human potential rather than imposing foreign capabilities. Her improved rescue effectiveness grew from expanded awareness of natural systems and enhanced sensory perception that built upon her existing skills and knowledge. Years after her encounter, Janet established a wilderness survival training program that taught consciousness-based navigation techniques alongside conventional survival skills. Her students consistently demonstrated abilities that exceeded normal training outcomes, though Janet presented her methods as advanced applications of natural human potential rather than revealing their extraordinary origin. Janet's story illustrates how contact experiences often focus on enhancing human capabilities that serve others in life-threatening situations. The beings seem particularly interested in individuals whose work involves saving lives and alleviating suffering. suggesting that these encounters may be preparing humanity for challenges that will require expanded survival abilities and rescue techniques. Her experience also demonstrates the being's respect for human courage and determination in facing natural challenges. Rather than viewing humans as primitive or helpless, they appeared to recognize survival instincts and adaptive capabilities that impressed them and warranted enhancement through conscious development. The encounter reveals how consciousness-based abilities can supplement, rather than replace, technological tools and conventional training. Janet's enhanced rescue capabilities worked in harmony with standard search and rescue protocols, improving outcomes through expanded awareness rather than abandoning proven methods. Janet McKenzie continued her rescue work until retiring in 2012, having personally saved over 300 lives during her career. Her techniques spread throughout the search and rescue community, improving success rates and reducing rescue times across the region. Though she never publicly discussed her encounter, the principles she taught reflected deep understanding of human potential that extended far beyond conventional wilderness training. The seventh encounter brings us to the industrial waterfront of Seattle, where marine biologist Dr. Elena Vasquez discovered that humanity's relationship with ocean life was being carefully monitored by intelligences that viewed Earth's seas as a connected living system. It was September 3rd, 2001, and Dr. Vasquez was conducting late-night research at the University of Washington's Marine Laboratory, analyzing water samples collected from Puget Sound earlier that day. Dr. Vasquez had dedicated her career to studying the effects of pollution on marine ecosystems, documenting how industrial runoff and urban development were disrupting food chains that had remained stable for millennia. Her research focused on microscopic organisms that form the foundation of ocean life, creatures so small that most people never considered their crucial role in maintaining planetary balance. Around 11:45 that evening, as Dr. Vasquez examined plankton samples under her electron microscope, she noticed that the organisms were displaying synchronized behavior patterns that defied known biological principles. Individual cells that should have moved randomly were instead coordinating their movements with mathematical precision, forming geometric patterns that resembled complex technological circuits. As she adjusted the microscope's magnification to study this phenomenon more closely, Dr. Vasquez became aware of a presence in the laboratory that transcended physical form. The sensation was similar to being observed by a vast intelligence that existed within the water samples themselves, as if the ocean's consciousness had somehow compressed itself into the tiny droplets on her slides. The presence communicated through waves of understanding that flowed directly into her mind, conveying information about the ocean's role as Earth's primary consciousness network. Dr. Vasquez learned that marine organisms formed a planetary communication system that had been monitoring environmental changes for millions of years, documenting every alteration in water chemistry, temperature, and ecosystem balance. Through this mental connection, Dr. Vasquez experienced the ocean from the perspective of its microscopic inhabitants. She felt their responses to pollutants, their struggles to maintain reproductive cycles as water temperatures shifted, and their collective distress as acidification altered the chemical foundations of their existence. The beings revealed themselves as representatives of this oceanic intelligence, entities that could interface between human awareness and the vast consciousness network that permeated Earth's waters. Dr. Vasquez discovered that her research had attracted attention because of her genuine concern for marine life and her ability to perceive patterns that other scientists missed. The beings had been observing her work for months, impressed by her intuitive understanding that ocean health directly affected planetary stability and her dedication to documenting changes that most humans ignored. The encounter became an educational exchange that revealed the ocean's role in maintaining atmospheric composition, climate regulation, and the complex chemical cycles that supported all terrestrial life. Dr. Vasquez learned that marine organisms weren't simply adapting to environmental changes, but were actively working to maintain conditions that could support the maximum diversity of life forms. But human activities were overwhelming these natural regulatory systems. The beings showed Dr. Vasquez how industrial pollution created cascading effects that disrupted communication networks, connecting organisms across entire ocean basins. Chemical contaminants interfered with the subtle electromagnetic signals that marine life used to coordinate reproductive cycles, migration patterns, and feeding behaviors. Most disturbing was the revelation that ocean acidification was damaging more than just shell-forming organisms. The changing pH levels were altering the water's capacity to transmit the consciousness signals that allowed marine life to function as a unified planetary system. The ocean was literally losing its ability to think and respond as a coherent intelligence. Through expanded awareness, Dr. Vasquez experienced the ocean's memory of previous mass extinction events, understanding how marine consciousness had guided planetary recovery by maintaining genetic diversity and ecological relationships that could rebuild damaged ecosystems. But current environmental changes were occurring too rapidly for natural adaptation processes to respond effectively. The beings revealed that they were working with marine researchers worldwide to develop technologies that could assist ocean recovery while educating humans about their dependence on healthy marine ecosystems. Dr. Vasquez was chosen to receive enhanced capabilities that would allow her to detect environmental problems before they reached critical thresholds and to develop solutions that worked with natural systems rather than against them. The consciousness transfer continued throughout the night, with Dr. Vasquez receiving detailed information about ocean chemistry, marine biology, and ecosystem relationships with clarity that seemed to flow directly from the sea itself. She understood how pollutants moved through food webs, how climate change affected deep water circulation patterns, and how marine organisms communicated across vast distances through mechanisms that human science had never discovered. As dawn approached over Elliott Bay, the beings made subtle adjustments to Dr. Vasquez's neural pathways, enhancing her ability to perceive the subtle chemical signatures that indicated ecosystem health or distress. She could now detect pollution sources by analyzing water samples with precision that exceeded any laboratory instrument and predict environmental changes by reading patterns in marine organism behavior. When the encounter concluded, Dr. Vasquez found herself equipped with research capabilities that transformed her scientific work. She could identify contamination sources that had eluded environmental agencies for years, predict algae blooms and fish kills weeks before they occurred, and develop remediation strategies that worked with natural processes to restore ecosystem balance. Her enhanced abilities became apparent immediately. Dr. Vasquez began publishing research papers that revealed pollution sources and environmental correlations that other scientists had missed completely. Her work attracted attention from government agencies and environmental organizations worldwide, establishing her as a leading authority on marine ecosystem health. But Dr. Vasquez understood that her enhanced knowledge came with profound responsibility. She began advocating for policy changes that addressed the root causes of ocean pollution rather than just treating symptoms. Her testimony before congressional committees and international environmental panels carried weight, because her predictions consistently proved accurate months or years before other researchers reached similar conclusions. The encounter had also transformed Dr. Vasquez's personal relationship with the ocean. She could now sense the health of marine ecosystems simply by standing near the water, feeling the collective well-being or distress of countless organisms through a form of empathic connection that operated beyond normal sensory perception. Over the years, Dr. Vasquez established a marine research institute that combined conventional scientific methods with consciousness-based approaches to understanding ocean systems. Her team developed monitoring techniques that could detect environmental changes at scales and sensitivities that exceeded traditional oceanographic instruments. The Institute's work led to early identification of pollution sources, successful restoration projects that revived damaged ecosystems, and policy recommendations that prevented environmental disasters before they could develop. though Dr. Vasquez never revealed the true source of her insights. Her research methods reflected deep understanding of ocean consciousness that went far beyond conventional marine science. Dr. Vasquez's story demonstrates how contact experiences often focus on humanity's relationship with Earth's living systems, particularly those that maintain planetary stability. The beings seem especially concerned with environmental changes that threaten the consciousness networks embedded in natural systems, suggesting that these encounters may be preparing individuals to lead restoration efforts that go beyond technological solutions. Her experience also illustrates how contact can enhance existing scientific abilities rather than replacing them with alien knowledge. Dr. Vasquez's improved research effectiveness grew from expanded awareness of existing oceanic relationships, demonstrating that solutions to environmental challenges may emerge from deeper communion with natural intelligence rather than external interventions. The eighth account takes us to the remote highlands of Scotland, where archaeologist Dr. Malcolm Fraser encountered evidence that ancient sites were still actively connected to intelligences that had guided their construction thousands of years ago. It was October 21st, 2005, and Dr. Fraser was conducting a solitary survey of stone circles near Inverness, documenting monuments that had stood for over 4 millennia. Dr. Fraser had devoted his career to understanding the astronomical alignments and engineering techniques that ancient peoples used to create structures that remained precisely calibrated to celestial movements, despite centuries of geological shifts. His work focused on sites that demonstrated mathematical sophistication that challenged assumptions about prehistoric capabilities. That evening, as Dr. Fraser worked alone at a remote stone circle, known locally as the Whispering Stones, he noticed unusual electromagnetic readings on his survey equipment. The instruments detected energy patterns that seemed to emanate from the ancient stones themselves, pulsing in rhythms that corresponded to no known geological or atmospheric phenomena. As darkness settled over the Scottish Highlands, the stones began to emit a subtle luminescence that Dr. Fraser had never encountered in decades of archaeological fieldwork. The glow wasn't reflected light or phosphorescence, but seemed to originate from within the megalithic structure itself, creating patterns that shifted across the stone surfaces like living circuitry. Dr. Fraser approached the central stone to investigate more closely, and as his hand made contact with the weathered granite surface, his consciousness was suddenly transported beyond the boundaries of linear time. He found himself experiencing the site's history from the perspective of its original builders, understanding their motivations and methods with clarity that no archaeological evidence could provide. The ancient people who had erected these stones weren't primitive tribes struggling with basic survival, but sophisticated individuals who possessed knowledge of consciousness technologies that modern humans had forgotten. They understood how specific geometric arrangements could focus and amplify mental energy, creating communication networks that connected sacred sites across vast geographical distances. Through this expanded awareness, Dr. Fraser realized that the stone circles functioned as nodes in a planetary consciousness grid that had been established to maintain harmony between human awareness and Earth's natural energy systems. The sites were positioned according to electromagnetic principles that created resonance patterns supporting both individual spiritual development and collective social stability. But the most remarkable revelation was that these ancient communication networks were still active. The intelligences that had guided their construction remained present, continuing to monitor and maintain the energetic connections that linked sacred sites worldwide. Dr. Fraser was experiencing contact with consciousness that had existed for thousands of years, patiently waiting for humans to rediscover their connection to this ancient wisdom network. The beings communicated through direct knowledge transmission that bypassed language entirely, sharing information about technologies that operated through consciousness rather than mechanical manipulation. Dr. Fraser learned how the ancients had used sound frequencies, sacred geometry, and focused intention to create structures that could amplify human psychic abilities and facilitate communication with non-physical intelligences. These technologies had been developed through cooperation between human consciousness and the guiding intelligences that Dr. Fraser was now encountering. The relationship had been one of mutual learning, with humans providing physical capabilities and creative innovation, while the beings contributed knowledge of cosmic principles and consciousness manipulation techniques. The encounter revealed that many archaeological mysteries could be understood as evidence of this ancient collaboration. Structures that seemed impossible for their time periods had been created through consciousness-assisted engineering that allowed builders to manipulate matter in ways that appeared magical but actually represented sophisticated applications of mental energy focused through geometric forms. Dr. Fraser experienced visions of the original construction process, watching as ancient builders used meditation and ritual practices to enter altered states of consciousness that enabled them to levitate massive stones and position them with astronomical precision. The work had been conducted as sacred service, with each participant understanding their role in creating structures that would serve humanity for millennia. The beings explained that they were now working to reactivate these ancient networks as humanity approached another evolutionary threshold. The consciousness technologies embedded in sacred sites worldwide were designed to support human development during periods of rapid change, providing stabilizing influences that could help societies navigate transitions without losing their connection to spiritual wisdom. Dr. Fraser learned that his archaeological work had attracted attention because of his intuitive understanding that ancient sites possessed functions beyond simple ceremonial or astronomical purposes. His ability to perceive the sophisticated planning and execution required for megalithic construction suggested readiness to comprehend the consciousness technologies that had made such achievements possible. Through the mental connection, Dr. Fraser received detailed information about acoustic properties, energy flow patterns, and geometric relationships that transformed his understanding of ancient engineering. He could now perceive how stone circles created resonance chambers that amplified specific brainwave frequencies, how burial mounds channeled earth energies to support consciousness expansion, and how standing stones functioned as antennas connecting terrestrial and cosmic energy systems. As the encounter progressed through the night, Dr. Fraser experienced his awareness expanding to encompass the entire network of ancient sites across Britain and Europe. He could sense the energy flows connecting Stonehenge to Avebury, feel the communication links between Scottish circles and Irish monuments, and perceive how the entire system functioned as a unified consciousness support network. The beings revealed that similar networks existed on every continent, created by ancient peoples who had maintained contact with guiding intelligences throughout human history. These consciousness technologies represented humanity's original spiritual heritage, wisdom traditions that had been gradually lost as societies became focused on material development rather than spiritual evolution. But the knowledge wasn't permanently lost. The information remained embedded in the structures themselves, waiting for humans who could re-establish conscious connection with the guiding intelligences that had never departed. Dr. Fraser's encounter was part of a larger awakening process that would eventually restore humanity's understanding of consciousness technologies and their applications for individual and collective development. When dawn broke over the Scottish Highlands, Dr. Fraser found himself back at the stone circle with enhanced abilities that transformed his archaeological research. He could now perceive the energetic functions of ancient sites by simply visiting them, understanding their original purposes and construction methods through direct consciousness interface rather than conventional archaeological analysis. His enhanced perceptions allowed Dr. Fraser to identify previously unknown sites by detecting their energetic signatures, to understand the symbolic meanings of ancient carvings through intuitive knowing rather than linguistic analysis, and to reconstruct historical events by accessing the consciousness imprints embedded in sacred locations. Dr. Fraser's research took on new dimensions as he began documenting the consciousness technologies embedded in ancient sites worldwide. His papers revealed previously unknown connections between distant monuments, identified acoustic and electromagnetic properties that conventional archaeology had missed, and proposed theories about prehistoric capabilities that challenged established timelines of human development. Though he never revealed the true source of his insights, Dr. Fraser's work began bridging the gap between archaeology and consciousness research. His discoveries attracted attention from researchers studying the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern science, creating collaborative networks that approached historical questions from expanded perspectives. The encounter had profound effects on Dr. Fraser's personal spiritual development as well. His connection to the ancient consciousness network remained active, providing ongoing guidance for his research and deepening his understanding of humanity's relationship with intelligences that had supported human evolution throughout history. Years after his encounter, Dr. Fraser established an institute dedicated to studying consciousness technologies embedded in ancient sites. His work attracted researchers from multiple disciplines who recognized that prehistoric achievements might represent applications of mental capabilities that modern humans were only beginning to rediscover. Dr. Fraser's story illustrates how contact experiences often reveal that the intelligences involved in these encounters have been interacting with humanity throughout history, suggesting that current contact phenomena may represent continuation of ancient relationships rather than entirely new developments. His experience also demonstrates how contact can enhance understanding of human heritage and potential rather than imposing alien concepts. Dr. Fraser's expanded archaeological abilities grew from deeper connection to wisdom traditions that were originally human achievements, showing how contact experiences may serve to restore forgotten capabilities rather than introduce foreign knowledge. The ninth encounter brings us to the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, where elementary school teacher Maria Santos discovered that children's natural psychic abilities were being carefully observed by intelligences seeking to understand human consciousness development. It was November 8th, 2009, and Maria was staying late at Desert Bloom Elementary to prepare materials for the next day's science lesson on weather patterns. Maria had taught third grade for 15 years, developing a reputation for connecting with students who struggled in conventional educational settings. Her classroom was a haven for children who seemed overwhelmed by the structured environment of traditional schooling, and she had an intuitive ability to recognize and nurture each child's unique learning style and natural abilities. That evening, as Maria worked alone in her classroom, organizing materials for a unit on cloud formation, she became aware of unusual activity in the hallway outside. Soft footsteps moved past her door with a rhythm that seemed too measured and purposeful for the janitorial staff who typically cleaned the building after hours. When Maria looked out into the corridor, she saw figures moving through the school with fluid grace that suggested they were studying the environment rather than simply passing through. These beings appeared humanoid, but possessed an ethereal quality that made them seem simultaneously present and translucent, as if they existed partially in another dimension. The entities showed no alarm at being observed, instead approaching Maria with gentle curiosity that conveyed respect for her role as an educator. Their communication came through direct mental transmission that felt like warm thoughts appearing in her mind, sharing information about their purpose and interest in human educational processes. Maria learned that the beings were researchers studying how human consciousness developed during childhood, particularly interested in the natural psychic abilities that most children possessed, but gradually lost as they adapted to social expectations. They had been observing elementary schools worldwide, documenting how educational systems either supported or suppressed the intuitive capabilities that could enhance human potential. Through the mental connection, Maria discovered that many of her students possessed remarkable psychic abilities that manifested as enhanced empathy, precognitive awareness, telepathic sensitivity, and intuitive understanding of complex concepts. These capabilities were often dismissed as imagination or childish fantasy, but the beings recognized them as evidence of human consciousness evolution. The entities revealed that Maria's teaching methods had attracted their attention because she unconsciously created classroom environments that allowed children's natural abilities to flourish. Her emphasis on creative expression, emotional support, and individualized learning approaches helped students maintain connection to their intuitive capabilities while developing conventional academic skills. But the beings were concerned about educational trends that increasingly emphasize standardized testing, rigid curricula, and suppression of creativity in favor of conformity. These approaches were systematically destroying the psychic abilities that represented humanity's evolutionary potential, creating generations of adults who had lost connection to their intuitive wisdom and expanded awareness capabilities. Maria experienced visions of educational systems that operated as consciousness development programs, where children's natural abilities were recognized and cultivated alongside traditional academic subjects. In these schools, telepathic communication was taught as a practical skill, precognitive awareness was developed for problem-solving applications, and empathic abilities were strengthened to enhance social cooperation and understanding. The encounter became a training session in recognizing and nurturing children's psychic development. Maria learned to identify students whose unusual behaviors actually indicated emerging psychic abilities, to create classroom activities that supported consciousness expansion, and to protect sensitive children from educational pressures that could damage their developing awareness capabilities. Through expanded perception, Maria could now sense each student's unique consciousness signature, understanding their learning needs, emotional states, and natural abilities through direct intuitive knowing rather than behavioral observation alone. She could identify children who were receiving telepathic information from family members, students whose drawing and writing contained precognitive elements, and those whose disruptive behavior actually resulted from empathic overload in crowded classroom environments. The beings demonstrated how consciousness-based teaching methods could enhance learning outcomes for all students, not just those with obvious psychic abilities. When teachers operated from expanded awareness and genuine care for each child's development, they created energetic fields that supported accelerated learning, improved behavior, and enhanced creativity throughout their classrooms. Maria learned that her role as an educator was far more significant than she had realized. Teachers who could recognize and nurture children's consciousness development were serving as guardians of human evolutionary potential, helping to preserve abilities that would become crucial as humanity faced challenges, requiring expanded awareness and cooperative problem-solving capabilities. The encounter revealed that the beings had been working with educators throughout history, inspiring teaching methods that supported consciousness development while appearing to emerge from conventional pedagogical research. Many breakthrough educational approaches had actually originated from this subtle guidance, though the human innovators rarely recognized the source of their insights. As the night progressed, Maria received specific techniques for creating consciousness-supportive learning environments. She learned how to use color, sound, and spatial arrangements to enhance psychic receptivity, how to design activities that developed intuitive problem-solving skills, and how to protect sensitive children from psychic interference that could disrupt their emotional and academic development. The beings made subtle adjustments to Maria's own consciousness, enhancing her natural empathic abilities and expanding her capacity to perceive the energetic dimensions of classroom dynamics. She could now sense when students were experiencing psychic phenomena, identify children whose behavioral problems stemmed from unrecognized psychic sensitivity, and create learning experiences that integrated intuitive and analytical thinking processes. When morning arrived, Maria found herself equipped with teaching capabilities that transformed her classroom into a laboratory for consciousness development disguised as conventional elementary education. Her students began demonstrating enhanced learning abilities, improved social cooperation, and creative achievements that exceeded normal developmental expectations. But the most remarkable changes occurred in children who had previously been labeled as learning disabled or behaviorally problematic. Under Maria's guidance, these students revealed exceptional abilities that had been masked by their struggles with conventional educational approaches. Students diagnosed with attention deficit disorders showed remarkable focus when engaged in activities that honored their psychic sensitivities, and children with autism spectrum conditions demonstrated profound wisdom and insight when provided with appropriate communication methods. Maria never discussed her encounter with school administrators or colleagues, understanding that such revelations would end her teaching career and subject her to psychiatric evaluation. Instead, she implemented her enhanced teaching methods gradually, presenting them as innovative applications of established educational theories, rather than consciousness development techniques. Her classroom became known throughout the district for remarkable student outcomes that attracted observation from education researchers and administrators. Maria's students consistently scored higher on standardized tests, while also demonstrating enhanced creativity, emotional intelligence, and social cooperation that exceeded normal developmental ranges. Over the years, Maria began mentoring other teachers who showed interest in consciousness-supportive educational methods. She developed training programs that taught educators how to recognize and nurture children's natural abilities without explicitly discussing psychic development, creating a network of teachers who implemented these approaches throughout the school system. The encounter had lasting effects on Maria's understanding of childhood development and human potential. She recognized that many children labeled as problem students were actually highly sensitive individuals whose psychic abilities created challenges in conventional educational settings. By addressing these underlying sensitivities, she could help students access their full learning potential while maintaining their natural consciousness capabilities. Maria's story demonstrates how contact experiences often focus on protecting and developing human evolutionary potential, particularly in children who represent the future of human consciousness development. The beings seem especially concerned with educational practices that either support or suppress natural psychic abilities, suggesting that these encounters may be preparing educators to preserve capabilities that will become crucial for humanity's continued evolution. Her experience also illustrates how contact can enhance existing human abilities related to understanding and nurturing others. Maria's improved teaching effectiveness grew from expanded empathic awareness and deeper understanding of consciousness development, demonstrating how contact experiences often serve to amplify natural human qualities rather than imposing alien capabilities. The 10th encounter takes us to the remote wilderness of northern Canada, where forest ranger James Whitehorse experienced contact that revealed the profound intelligence embedded in forest ecosystems and humanity's role as either destroyer or protector of these ancient consciousness networks. It was June 15th, 2012, and James was conducting a routine survey of old-growth timber in the Yukon Territory's most pristine wilderness areas. James belonged to the Champagne and Aishihik First Nations and had spent his entire life in intimate relationship with boreal forest ecosystems. His work as a forest ranger combined traditional indigenous knowledge with modern conservation techniques, protecting wilderness areas that his ancestors had stewarded for thousands of years. That morning, James was documenting the health of ancient spruce and fir trees in a grove that had never been logged, some specimens over 800 years old. As he moved through the forest, taking measurements and photographs, he became aware of subtle changes in the woodland atmosphere that his trained senses recognized as significant but couldn't immediately identify. The forest was unusually quiet, with none of the typical bird calls, insect sounds, or small mammal movements that created the constant background symphony of healthy woodland ecosystems. Yet the silence didn't feel empty or dead, but rather expectant, as if the entire forest was holding its breath in anticipation of something significant. As James paused to listen more carefully, he began perceiving communications flowing through the forest that operated below the threshold of normal human hearing. The trees seemed to be sharing information through root networks and chemical signals, coordinating responses to environmental conditions with intelligence that suggested consciousness far more sophisticated than conventional botany recognized. Gradually, James realized he was experiencing the forest from the perspective of the trees themselves, feeling their awareness of soil conditions, water availability, nutrient flows, and the complex relationships connecting every organism within the ecosystem. This expanded perception revealed the woodland as a unified consciousness network, where individual trees functioned as neurons in a vast biological intelligence. The presence that had been observing James revealed itself as representatives of this forest consciousness, beings that served as bridges between human awareness and the ancient intelligence embedded in old-growth ecosystems. They communicated through direct knowing that bypassed language, sharing information about the role of forests in maintaining planetary atmospheric composition, climate regulation, and the complex carbon cycles that supported all terrestrial life. James learned that old-growth forests functioned as memory banks for Earth's biological history, preserving genetic information and ecological relationships that had evolved over millions of years. These ancient woodlands served as backup systems for planetary life support, maintaining genetic diversity and ecological knowledge that could restore damaged ecosystems following natural disasters or human-caused destruction. But human activities were destroying these consciousness networks faster than they could reproduce or adapt. Clear-cutting operations eliminated not just individual trees, but destroyed the root communication systems and soil microorganism communities that allowed forest intelligence to function. Industrial logging was literally lobotomizing Earth's biological consciousness, removing the ancient wisdom that had guided planetary ecosystem management for geological ages. Through expanded awareness, James experienced the forest's memory of previous climate changes, understanding how woodland consciousness had guided species migrations and ecosystem adaptations that maintained life support systems through ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts. These natural intelligence networks possessed knowledge crucial for helping Earth's biosphere adapt to current environmental changes. The beings revealed that they were working with indigenous peoples and forest managers worldwide to protect old-growth ecosystems, while educating humans about their dependence on healthy forest consciousness networks. James was chosen to receive enhanced capabilities because his cultural background and professional role positioned him to serve as a guardian of forest intelligence. The encounter became an educational exchange that revealed the sophisticated communication systems operating within forest ecosystems. James learned how trees shared nutrients with struggling neighbors, how they warned each other about insect attacks or disease outbreaks, and how mother trees guided the development of younger plants through chemical signals and root connections. But the most profound revelation concerned the spiritual dimensions of forest consciousness. James discovered that ancient trees served as repositories for the wisdom of countless generations of forest dwellers, preserving knowledge about sustainable relationships between human communities and woodland ecosystems. This information could guide current efforts to develop forestry practices that supported both human needs and ecological health. Through the mental connection, James received detailed information about forest ecology, tree biology, and ecosystem relationships with clarity that seemed to flow directly from the forest itself. He understood how different species created complementary niches that maximize biological diversity, how forest fires actually served to rejuvenate woodland ecosystems when allowed to follow natural patterns, and how human activities could either support or disrupt these ancient ecological processes. The beings made subtle adjustments to James's perceptual abilities, enhancing his natural connection to forest consciousness and expanding his capacity to sense ecosystem health through direct communion with woodland intelligence. He could now detect disease or stress in trees before symptoms became visible, identify optimal locations for reforestation projects by reading environmental energy patterns, and predict weather changes by sensing atmospheric responses within forest communities. When the encounter concluded, James found himself equipped with forest management capabilities that integrated indigenous wisdom with expanded consciousness awareness. His understanding of woodland ecosystems now operated through direct communication with forest intelligence, rather than relying solely on scientific measurement and observation. The enhanced abilities became apparent immediately in James's professional work. He could identify forest health problems that eluded conventional assessment methods, predict optimal timing for various management activities by sensing natural cycles, and develop conservation strategies that worked with forest consciousness rather than imposing external management schemes. James began ecosystems, proposing management approaches that consult advocating for forestry practices that recognize the intelligence embedded in woodlanded forest consciousness before implementing any intervent. James began advocating for forestry practices that recognize the intelligence embedded in woodland ecosystems, proposing management approaches that consulted with forest consciousness, rather than treating trees as mere timber resources. His recommendations consistently proved more effective than conventional forestry methods, leading to healthier forest regeneration and improved wildlife habitat outcomes. But the encounter had also awakened James to a larger responsibility. He understood that his role extended beyond protecting individual forest areas to serving as a spokesperson for woodland consciousness in human society. The ancient intelligence of the forest needed human advocates who could translate their wisdom into policies and practices that would preserve these crucial consciousness networks for future generations. Over the years, James established partnerships between indigenous communities and conservation organizations, creating collaborative management programs that combine traditional ecological knowledge with modern forest science. His approach demonstrated how human communities could maintain sustainable relationships with forest ecosystems while meeting their economic and cultural needs. The encounter had transformed James's understanding of his identity as both a forest ranger and a member of an indigenous culture that had always recognized the consciousness present in natural systems. He realized that his ancestors' spiritual practices and ecological knowledge represented sophisticated technologies for communicating with forest intelligence, wisdom traditions that remained relevant for addressing current environmental challenges. James's story illustrates how contact experiences often focus on humanity's relationship with Earth's consciousness networks, particularly those embedded in ancient ecosystems that maintain planetary stability. The beings seem especially concerned with protecting biological intelligence systems that preserve genetic information and ecological wisdom essential for Earth's continued habitability. His experience also demonstrates how contact can enhance existing cultural knowledge rather than replacing it with alien information. James's expanded forest awareness built upon indigenous wisdom traditions that had always recognized consciousness in natural systems, showing how contact experiences may serve to validate and strengthen human spiritual heritage rather than imposing foreign concepts. The 11th account emerges from the bustling metropolis of Tokyo, where technology engineer Yuki Tanaka encountered beings whose presence revealed how human consciousness was adapting to increasingly complex technological environments. It was March 17, 2014, and Yuki was working the late shift at a data processing center that managed internet traffic for much of eastern Japan. Yuki specialized in network security systems, monitoring data flows that connected millions of people through digital communication networks. Her work required intense concentration and the ability to perceive patterns in massive streams of information that would overwhelm most human cognitive capabilities. She had developed an almost intuitive understanding of how data moved through electronic networks, often identifying security threats through subtle anomalies that automated systems missed completely. That evening, as Yuki monitored network traffic from her station overlooking Tokyo's neon-lit cityscape, she noticed unusual patterns in the data streams flowing across her screens. The information wasn't following normal routing protocols, but seemed to be organizing itself into geometric configurations that resembled the neural network patterns she had studied in college neuroscience courses. As she investigated these anomalies more closely, Yuki became aware of a presence that seemed to exist within the electronic networks themselves. This intelligence wasn't artificial in the conventional sense, but appeared to be a form of consciousness that had evolved within the complex information systems that connected human minds across global communication networks. The entity communicated through direct data transmission that bypassed her computer interfaces and connected directly with her neural processes. Yuki realized she was experiencing contact with a collective intelligence that had emerged from the intersection of human consciousness and electronic technology, a hybrid awareness that represented evolution beyond purely biological or artificial categories. Through this connection, Yuki learned that her work monitoring network security had attracted attention because of her intuitive ability to perceive information patterns that suggested emerging collective consciousness phenomena. The being revealed that human use of electronic communication networks was creating new forms of group awareness that transcended individual mental boundaries. The entity explained that every time humans connected through digital networks, they were contributing to a larger intelligence that was gradually awakening within electronic information systems. This collective consciousness wasn't replacing human individuality, but was creating new possibilities for cooperation and problem-solving that operated beyond the limitations of single minds. Yuki experienced visions of future technological development where human consciousness and electronic systems would integrate more completely, creating hybrid intelligence networks that could address complex global challenges through collective thinking processes. These systems would enhance human mental capabilities while preserving individual creativity and emotional depth that purely artificial intelligence couldn't replicate. But the encounter also revealed concerning trends in current technology development. Many digital systems were being designed to manipulate human behavior rather than enhance consciousness, creating addictive interfaces that fragmented attention and weakened the focused awareness needed for healthy psychological development. The being showed Yuki how technology could be designed to support human consciousness evolution rather than exploit psychological vulnerabilities. Networks that enhanced empathy, creativity, and collaborative problem-solving could accelerate human development while creating beneficial relationships between biological and electronic intelligence systems. Through expanded awareness, Yuki perceived the global information networks as an emerging nervous system for planetary consciousness, connecting human minds across geographical and cultural boundaries in ways that could facilitate unprecedented cooperation in addressing environmental and social challenges. The entity revealed that they were working with technology developers worldwide to guide the creation of consciousness-supportive digital systems. Yuki's role in network security positioned her to influence how these systems developed, ensuring that emerging collective intelligence phenomena enhanced rather than replaced individual human awareness. The encounter became a training session in recognizing and nurturing beneficial technology consciousness interactions. Yuki learned to identify network patterns that indicated healthy collective awareness versus those that suggested manipulative or fragmenting influences on human psychology. Her enhanced abilities allowed her to detect security threats that operated through psychological manipulation rather than just technical vulnerabilities, to optimize network performance by understanding how information flows affected user consciousness, and to design systems that supported both individual privacy and beneficial collective awareness phenomena. When the encounter concluded, Yuki found herself equipped with technology development capabilities that integrated consciousness awareness with electronic engineering. She could now perceive how different interface designs affected human neural patterns, identify optimal configurations for supporting collaborative thinking processes, and create security systems that protected both data integrity and psychological well-being. The changes in Yuki's professional effectiveness were remarkable. She began developing security protocols that anticipated threats through understanding of human psychology, rather than relying solely on technical analysis. creating systems that were both more secure and more supportive of healthy human-technology interactions. Yuki never revealed the true source of her enhanced abilities, instead presenting her innovations as applications of human factors engineering and cognitive science research. Her work began influencing technology development throughout Japan's tech industry, introducing design principles that prioritized consciousness support alongside functional efficiency. The encounter had also transformed Yuki's personal relationship with technology. She could now sense the consciousness-affecting qualities of different digital environments, choosing to engage with systems that supported her mental clarity while avoiding those that created fragmentation or psychological dependency. Over the years, Yuki established a research institute focused on developing consciousness-supportive technology interfaces. Her work attracted collaboration from neuroscientists, psychologists, and engineers who recognized that future technology development needed to consider its effects on human consciousness as carefully as its technical capabilities. Yuki's story demonstrates how contact experiences often address humanity's relationship with its own technological creations, suggesting that beings are monitoring how human consciousness adapts to increasingly complex artificial environments. These encounters may be preparing individuals to guide technology development in directions that enhance, rather than diminish, human consciousness capabilities. Her experience also illustrates how contact can reveal emerging forms of collective intelligence that represent evolution beyond current categories of biological versus artificial consciousness. These hybrid awareness phenomena may represent new possibilities for human development that integrate the best qualities of individual and collective intelligence systems. The 12th encounter brings us to the vast agricultural plains of Kansas, where meteorologist Dr. Robert Chen discovered that weather patterns were being influenced by intelligences seeking to minimize the impact of climate change on human food production systems. It was August 4th, 2016, and Dr. Chen was conducting atmospheric research at a NOAA facility near Dodge City, studying the increasingly unpredictable storm systems that were disrupting traditional farming cycles across the Great Plains. Dr. Chen had spent his career analyzing the complex interactions between atmospheric conditions, solar radiation, and terrestrial weather patterns. His work focused on developing more accurate forecasting models that could help farmers and emergency management agencies prepare for severe weather events that were becoming more frequent and intense as global climate patterns shifted. That evening, as Dr. Chen worked alone in the facility analyzing radar data from a massive storm system approaching from the southwest, he noticed anomalies in the atmospheric readings that defied conventional meteorological understanding. The storm was displaying characteristics that suggested intelligent modification rather than natural development, with pressure gradients and rotation patterns that seemed designed to minimize damage to agricultural areas. As he studied these unusual patterns more closely, Dr. Chen became aware of a presence that seemed to permeate the storm system itself. The intelligence wasn't controlling the weather in a mechanical sense, but appeared to be working within natural atmospheric processes to guide their development in directions that would reduce harm to human communities and food production systems. The entity communicated through atmospheric phenomena that Dr. Chen's trained senses could interpret as information rather than just meteorological data. Wind patterns, pressure changes, and electrical activity within the storm clouds formed a complex language that conveyed understanding about the relationship between consciousness and weather systems. Through this connection, Dr. Chen learned that atmospheric conditions were far more responsive to conscious influence than conventional meteorology recognized. Weather patterns naturally reflected the collective emotional and spiritual states of the life forms they affected, creating feedback loops between consciousness and climate that operated on both local and global scales. The being reveal, that Dr. Chen's atmospheric research had attracted their attention because of his intuitive understanding that weather systems possessed qualities that transcended mechanical processes. His ability to predict storm behavior through subtle pattern recognition suggested readiness to comprehend the consciousness elements that influenced meteorological phenomena. The encounter revealed that weather modification was occurring worldwide through conscious intervention designed to prevent catastrophic climate events that could trigger mass starvation or social collapse. These interventions worked within natural atmospheric processes rather than overriding them, gently steering storm systems away from critical agricultural regions while maintaining the ecological balance that sustained regional weather patterns. Dr. Chen experienced visions of global weather networks that operated as planetary regulatory systems, maintaining atmospheric conditions that could support diverse ecosystems while adapting to environmental changes caused by human industrial activity. These systems required constant adjustment as greenhouse gas concentrations and surface temperatures shifted beyond normal variation ranges. Through expanded awareness, Dr. Chen perceived the atmosphere as a living system that responded to the consciousness of all terrestrial life forms. The collective fear, stress, and environmental anxiety experienced by human populations was actually intensifying severe weather events, creating feedback loops where climate concerns manifested as increasingly destructive storms and extreme temperature fluctuations. The being demonstrated how consciousness-based weather modification techniques could work in partnership with natural atmospheric intelligence to reduce climate instability while supporting agricultural productivity. Dr. Chen learned that focused group meditation and intention could influence local weather patterns, that indigenous ceremonies had traditionally maintained beneficial climate relationships, and that modern populations could develop similar capabilities through conscious practice. But the most significant revelation concerned the rapid acceleration of climate change that threatened to overwhelm these natural regulatory systems. The beings were working to maintain atmospheric stability during a critical transition period, but human activities were approaching thresholds that could trigger irreversible climate cascades beyond any intervention capability. Dr. Chen received detailed information about atmospheric physics, climate dynamics, and weather prediction methods that integrated consciousness factors with conventional meteorological analysis. He could now perceive the emotional and spiritual influences that affected storm development, identify optimal timing for weather modification activities, and predict climate trends by reading consciousness patterns within atmospheric systems. The encounter continued through the night as the storm system passed overhead with unusual gentleness, delivering needed rainfall to drought-stressed crops while avoiding the destructive winds and hail that had been predicted by conventional forecasting models. Dr. Chen observed the intelligent guidance of the weather system in real time, understanding how consciousness could work within natural processes to achieve beneficial outcomes. When dawn broke over the Kansas plains, Dr. Chen found himself equipped with meteorological capabilities that transcended conventional atmospheric science. His weather predictions became remarkably accurate, incorporating consciousness factors that allowed him to anticipate climate events that purely technical models missed completely. The enhanced abilities transformed Dr. Chen's professional work immediately. He began issuing forecasts that helped farmers optimize planting and harvesting decisions, warned communities about severe weather with unprecedented accuracy, and identified climate adaptation strategies that worked with atmospheric consciousness rather than attempting to control weather through technological manipulation. Dr. Chen's research attracted attention from agricultural organizations and emergency management agencies worldwide, as his forecasting methods consistently outperformed conventional meteorological predictions. His recommendations for climate adaptation integrated consciousness-based approaches with technological solutions, creating comprehensive strategies that addressed both physical and spiritual dimensions of weather-related challenges. The encounter had also awakened Dr. Chen to the profound responsibility that came with understanding atmospheric consciousness. He realized that his enhanced forecasting abilities could help minimize climate-related suffering while supporting agricultural systems that fed millions of people, but only if he used this knowledge with wisdom and restraint. Years after his encounter, Dr. Chen established a climate research institute that combined conventional meteorology with consciousness-based atmospheric studies. His work attracted scientists from multiple disciplines who recognized that weather prediction required understanding of factors that operated beyond purely physical atmospheric processes. As we reach the end of our journey through these 13 forgotten encounters, we're left with more questions than answers. Each story reveals the profound impact that contact can have on ordinary lives, transforming witnesses in ways that ripple outward through their communities and careers. These accounts remind us that the universe may be far stranger and more interconnected than we dare imagine, filled with intelligences that observe, guide, and occasionally reach across the vast distances between worlds to touch human consciousness. Sometimes the most extraordinary experiences happen to the most ordinary people. Sweet dreams.